Carl, thanks for doing the interview.
Oh, my pleasure.
Do you like speaking in front of audiences? You've done this for the Boca Festival for a while now. Talk to me about it.
When I was a kid, I was terrified. When I was in high school, I was terrified of getting up in front of an auditorium or even in a class and reading something. But once I started doing the books, I sort of had to get good at it because the book tours put you out there. And if you're going to be successful or have people interested in buying the books, you have to learn it. So now I don't mind it at all. But I actually, in Florida, it's great fun for me because it's like everybody gets the joke in Florida. You don't have to explain anything to a Florida audience. They get it.
Does the material change, or is it like the same spiel?
No, it'll change. I mean, I've got some stuff I talk about, some funny Florida stories that people obviously know and some they don't know. And then, but it'll, it's up until the day, I'm still a journalist at heart, so up until the day before I show up, I'll be looking at the news for something. And there will be something now. I mean, it's just, it's inevitable. So I keep it pretty flexible.
And it's March 5th is your night, right?
Yes, yeah, I believe so, yeah.
That's great. Okay. Fever Beach.
Yeah, that's coming out in May. It's the new novel, and the premise is, and you might remember, we had this story in South Florida where people were throwing these baggies in people's yards, and that had hate literature in it. They're just randomly going up and down the streets throwing baggies, and it had like rice or stones in it so it wouldn't blow away. And I picked it up, and I looked at it, and all I could think of, it's disgusting, yes, but all I could think of was somewhere there's two nitwits in an apartment sitting there stuffing baggies with this stuff and then taking it out to their, and it turned out to be, shockingly, a pickup truck, and just driving randomly around neighborhoods and throwing neighbors in. I thought, well, who are those two idiots? And so what if they had a backstory, and what if I could do something in it with novels? So these are two guys that they're such bumblers, they didn't even make the cut, like the Proud Boys. You know what I'm saying? They're like Oath Keepers. No, or you can't. So they're starting their own group. They're trying to get it going.
Losers.
Not in their minds, but yeah, they've had checkered histories and not a terrible amount of success in their lives with relationships or with their parents or with work. One of them works in a factory that manufactures very lifelike adult items, adult
sex
novelties,
toys?
Sex toys, yes. Because that also happened to me. We ordered this wicker basket for dog toys, and Katie was sick, and Amazon comes. She goes, "That's the basket for the dogs. Could you bring it in?" And I bring it in. And I said, "God, this is heavy." I said, "This is a wicker basket for the dogs," and I cut it open. It was not. It was a how should I say? It was a like and fleshy human torso. Let's like that way. And I thought. So I walked back to the bedroom. I said, and she goes, "Well, I won't say what she said." But she said, and all I said was, "There's some guy who's opening a box with a wicker basket in right now, who's the saddest man in America because he was waiting for this. They got the orders mixed up." So I said, "Send it back to Amazon." It was Amazon. What was my reason for returning? I forget. I came up with a pretty good one. But anyway, I thought, well, okay, that might work in a book.
Let's talk about Bad Monkey.
Yeah.
Coming back for a second season.
It is.
Let me ask you this. Forgive me because I've not seen it. Does the first season cover the entirety of the book?
The first season pretty much covers the entirety of the book, and of course it's not exactly like the book. And the second season, because some of the characters in the first season, obviously Vince Vaughn, but some of the other characters were popular, so they're doing a second season. They're extending some plot lines. I don't know everything. I didn't talking to the writers, but they're working things up, and it's there'll be some characters that were popular and not in the first series. Apple does a great job, and I'm lucky to work with Bill Lawrence, who it's his baby, and he's shrinking in Ted Lasso and Scrubs, and he's a writer at heart. So it's fun when you're working with Hollywood to not dealing with executives, to dealing with actual writers that understand the craft and kind of understand plot changes, and everything. You can't have a book exactly like a TV show or a movie, or vice versa. It just doesn't work.
Is it gratifying as a writer that characters that you created are now going to go on to things that you didn't envision for them, and that someone else is going to take these creations of yours?
Yeah. It's an interesting feeling, because there was a second book with Yancey in it, Razor Girl, which may or may not show up in this progression of this. But I don't think that like that when I'm writing. I think this is a sort of a self-contained, except for a few characters that recur in some of the novels. I don't think about that, but it's in the hands of another group of writers. It's like, what kind of daycare center are they running? I hope it's a good one.
Right. You wear a lot of hats. You've never been pigeonholed as a writer. You've dabbled in a lot of things, and it seems like you're able to write what you want to write about. Mm-hmm. You talked to me already a little bit about things that happen to you that are kind of zany. You think of like a backstory about them, but where else does inspiration come from?
Well, I mean, a lot of it's from the news. I was a journalist for so long. I went to work in the Herald when I was 23, and I'd already been a reporter a couple of years, and I just retired a couple of years ago. But so I'm addicted to news flow, and now in this day and age, it's maybe not the best thing to do for your soul in the morning to get up and look at the headlines, but I still do it, and stories come to me, feelings come to me, and I don't, since I retired from the column a couple of years ago, I don't have that weekly outlet where you can really just cut loose. And the Herald was great. I literally could write anything, as long as it was factual, and as long as, it was one of those rare newspapers where you could write a critical column about your own publisher, which I did, and every word of it was published the way I wrote it. That doesn't happen very often in our business, and so I was very lucky.
Are you disheartened about what's happening to newspapers?
I am, and I'm disheartened for communities. The people are going to suffer, the readers. The community journalism, local journalism is the heart of journalism. You live in a town and there's a city council meeting or there's a zoning board meeting, and I grew up where you could read about it in the paper. Okay, oh God, we got to show up tonight. They're going to put a big box store at the end of our street next to the park, or they're going to put an X-rated theater next to the kindergarten. Well, you're going to show up and you're going to cry. Now, those boots aren't on the ground. This has nothing to do about the politics of journalism. It's about eyes and ears that are out there representing a community that in many cases is going to suffer because of not having, the corruption. It's not endemic to Florida, but it flowers, it blooms in Florida, just like algae and mold and everything else. I mean, and it can be at the smallest level. And if you don't have a reporter there catching it, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to get screwed. And that's the tragedy of the demise of daily journalism, daily newspapers.
It does. It stinks. You've said that very well. I wish it wasn't happening too. It's happening in television too, not just in print, but
it is
in all the traditional media outlets. But I think there will always be an appetite for the information, and what we're doing is just it's moving to different platforms.
It is, but people have a gut hunger for news. Now, you and I are sitting right now. 3 ambulances and 5 police cars went by the street right now. You and I would walk out to the street to see what's happening, right? And if we couldn't see it or they went by us, we'd look for it in the paper or look for it on your newscast. When that stops happening, when you can't give them readers and citizens in a basic democracy the who, what, why, where of what's going on in their neighborhood, that's a problem. It's a problem for democracy.
Okay, the last one from my list is about Vero. You told me you've been here for 20
about
plus
20
years.
Yeah, I've been in Vero about 20 years. I lived in the Keys before that for a while, and I loved the Keys, always will, but it got a little crowded where I lived, and I'm not a big fan of congestion and traffic and humanity in general, let's be honest.
Your dialogue is very catchy. And they're all unique. The characters' voices are all unique. How does the voice come to you? Because you can, and let me talk a little more to set this up. You can picture what a character has in their background and why they are the way that they are. But the way that you make them speak on the page, everyone has their own unique voice. How does that come to you?
It's agonizing, but dialogue is so important. And I think this comes from our line of work, to be honest. A lot of what you do as a reporter and a journalist, especially when you're a street reporter, is listening. And right away you find out that people don't often speak like they do in novels. They don't speak in complete sentences and paragraphs. They jump all over the place. They get emotional. And they have distinct voices. Now, it may just be for 30 seconds or it may be 2 paragraphs in a story I'm writing. But the truth is, if you hear it enough, you know what authentic is when you see it. And so now it's appearing on a printed page, in my case. So it's running through my head at the same time. But I probably work on the dialogue more than anything else in the novels, because there's nothing worse than a flat line or a line that rings untrue for a certain character. So you sit there and beat yourself up over it. It's not easy, but once you get into the rhythm of how different characters speak, it helps you continue the story, because when I start a novel, I don't really have a story. I have a cast of characters in my head that I'm going to put on this crazy little stage, and they're all going to bump into each other, and I'm going to see where they go and where they lead me. I have no idea how the book's going to end. So I rely on those distinct voices and behaviors to propel the plot forward.
Do you hear them?
Yeah, in my head I do. And as I come to know them, as the chapters go by and I come to know them, and sometimes the great thing about what I do is the characters can surprise you. I mean, it's a wonderful thing when it happens, when it's a character that you think, well, this will be around for a couple chapters and then we'll get him on a bus somewhere, he or she, and all of a sudden they come to life and they take over a scene or a patch, and wait a minute, well, I'm going to follow this one for a while. That's one of the great joys and one of the great selfish pleasures of writing novels, is it's your story. I'm not writing for a committee like TV writers have to do and movie screenwriters have to do. This is all mine, and it's either gonna be good or it's gonna suck, but it's on me,
People that know your work know that you're a smartass. I say that with respect and affection. Has there ever been a time that you can think of where being a smartass has gotten you into trouble?
In school, it got me into trouble. My dad, I remember him, he used to say to me, because I'd at the dinner table, I'd say something, and he didn't say much, but he looked at me and goes, your mouth is going to get you in trouble one day. And it did. It got me in trouble school a couple times.
In point of fact, it's also made you a lot of money.
Well, I don't know that he foresaw that. I think he may have used the term a little tougher than smart ass, but yeah, I mean, I just, in school settings, and yeah, it got me in trouble in the newsroom a few times too, at meetings. You have editorial, I hate meetings, and most good journalists, if you're putting out the news for the day, TV, podcast, whatever it is, you don't want to go to meetings. You hate meetings. And in your mind, meetings are for people that aren't really involved in this noble enterprise, right? So yeah, maybe I had an attitude, yeah. But you're right. On the other side of the coin, I've done okay with it.
You're also a lot of your characters have secrets.
Mm-hmm.
They're complex people, but there's a down-to-earthness to them. Let me set this up a little better. A lot of them are very approachable, but we know things about them that other people in their lives don't know about them. So we're in on their secrets. Do you think that resonates with people, with your readers?
Well, yeah, because I think everybody, as long as you live, you're still learning things about people you think you know. And people come into your lives, they're not telling you the whole story. And it might be good, it might be bad, but it's important what makes them tick. And by the end of a novel or by the end of a film or whatever it is, you want to think that, or a series, for example, you want to think you know somebody completely, and that's why it unfolds. And I think when you meet somebody new in your lives or in business or whatever, it's just going to kind of trickle out. They're not going to sit down and tell you, oh, by the way, yeah, I was selling meth for about 5 years, but now I'm fine. That isn't going to be the first conversation you're going to have with them.
Probably not.
No, especially if it's a job interview or something. That's not what they're going to volunteer. So you have to build that in. It was different. It's different with the kids' books that I do, like Hoot and Flush, because your characters are young characters, and to the extent that it's almost easier. I don't want to say easier to write, but it's more liberating because they don't bring a lot of baggage in. They don't bring years of this or years of that or a bad divorce, into the thing. They're just kids reacting to something that's happening to them and trying to do the right thing. So those books are kind of liberating and fun to do because the characters, it's not that they're not that complicated. They're not fully developed and grown yet. They're just hitting the ground running, and that can be a fun thing for a writer to have at your disposal, especially after you do a novel where most of your characters are deeply disturbed and haunt you in your dreams after you're dying.
Well, you talk about a book that's been influential on you. I know you're a big Elmore fan, but will you talk about one that...
Yeah, absolutely. I've said it before. I think when I was young, my dad gave me a book called Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, and it was about World War II, and he said, it's hilarious and tragic, and I didn't understand how both could be the same thing. And it was a work of genius, obviously, and it's been around forever, but at the time it opened my eyes to the fact that if you're a good enough writer, and this is before I was really writing, I was writing little things for a high school paper, stuff like that, but if you're a good enough writer, and you can make people laugh for the right reasons, which is sort of the heart of satire, it's got to be very, very satisfying. And I read the book and I put it down, I go, he pulled it off. You're in the middle of the worst parts of the bloodiest and the worst part of war, and yet it's a satire and it's funny. And it wasn't Dr. Strangelove. It was all, their characters were not caricatures or too extreme, and so that book opened some possibilities for me. A book, 92 in the Shade, that Tom McGuane wrote, about Key West, about fishing guides in Key West. That was my childhood, was that kind of fishing, and those guys were my Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays when I was a kid, those fishing guides. But the way Tom did it, and I thought, 99% of America isn't really going to be all into fly fishing for tarpon, right? But it wasn't about that. It was so much bigger, and again, you're laughing, and at the same time, some of it's, daunting, and I thought, God, that is quite an act for a writer to be able to do, to be able to make you turn the page, but you're laughing on the inside, but there's a joke and you're getting it.
It takes a lot of discipline to be a writer.
Yeah.
Do you allot an amount of time every day or every week that you're going to do it? Like, how do you stay on the horse?
I wish I was one of those writers. When I'm in the middle of a book, when it's rolling, at the beginning it's very slow. I may get a paragraph a day. I may get 2 pages a day. Everything's a mess. But once you're into it, you got the characters and it's rolling, and then I write every day. Every day. Saturdays, Sundays. It may only be a few hours. I write till it's I can see that it's shitty.
Okay.
I can't say that on TV, but I write until
Maybe we can say it on YouTube, Carl.
I write until I can see that what I'm going to write from now on I'm going to throw away. You run out of juice, and it may be a few hours, and it may be all day. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm there agonizing over it all day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm staring, and I'll go back and rewrite a line of dialogue, and I'm not. This doesn't make me a good writer. It makes me unwell. But I'll rewrite a line of dialogue 10 or 12 times.
So you're editing as you go.
Brutally.
Like you don't charge ahead and then go back and look at it. You're doing it as you go.
No, and I send the books to my editors in like 5-chapter increments and get feedback. And my preference is if I'm going off the rails or something is not working, I have time to fix it instead of dumping a whole manuscript on somebody where it's much harder to go back and restitch. And I like the feedback, and they're usually right. They're good. My agent's terrific. Same agent I've had since 1979, and my editor I've had.
Wow.
Yeah. So their judgment I trust, but I want to get back right away and get it back on track, and then move forward. I don't like having in my mind saying, well, I don't like this part, but keep writing. We'll go back and fix it later. I can't. My brain, it nags at me that, okay, if something's wrong, I want to fix it now, or if something needs to be improved, I want to do it now.
You're such a creative guy, and I bet inspiration comes to you like at all times. So how do you discipline your mind to be like, okay, I'm going to finish this idea first before I move to this idea? Like if it's constantly in the queue, how do you like stay with what you're doing?
You're assuming that I have more than one idea in my head at a time.
I am assuming
very
that.
Seldom true.
Okay.
Once I usually get one idea, I'm so overjoyed to have an idea that I don't have any trouble uncluttering. When I was doing the column and writing the books, there was a discipline because it's two different kinds of writing muscles there. One's 700 words, and your deadline is 3 o'clock on Thursday, and it's got to all be. And the book, there are deadlines in the book, but it's much different, and the column is bouncing off news, so the material is there. Everything else in my world has to come out of my head. And so some days some days you don't feel very funny. Some days, and you're not, I think my wife would tell you that. But the excitement as you get into it and the characters, I hope I'm conveying that as difficult it is, and it never gets any easier, it's still very exciting when they start surprising you and doing things. And by the last third of the novel, you got the pedal down. It's just, okay, I know I got to keep the momentum up. And I may not know every single moment of how the ending is going to go, but I know I got to get there because the momentum is there, and then you just step on it.
What's your genre?
That's a good question. It always amuses me if I walk into a bookstore, if I'm doing an event, or even if I'm just in a town visiting and I see it under like crime fiction or mystery fiction. It really is either one. And I always say it when I talk to crowds or groups of writers, when you think about it, all novels are about crime. Crimes of the heart, crimes of the soul, or whether they're actual felonies. There's always a crime or a misdeed somewhere in the story. So you could say that about any novel. It's crime fiction. Dr. Zhivago, and it doesn't matter. You can find that core of it. So it's always amusing, but they do have to find somewhere on the shelves to put it. And honestly, there aren't bookshelves that go to the ceiling that are marked humor or satire. There's just not that many. So they have to do it. So I understand and I get it, but I don't think of that at all. I don't think of, what's the great dark crime that's going to be at the center of this novel. I'm thinking about the characters and their lives. And there'll be scams and there'll be outrageous things that happen because all my books are set in Florida.
If there was such a genre as Florida Man, you could occupy a lot of shelf space in that.
I think you probably could, and there are more and more writers. We talked about this that have moved into Florida and that are trying to get on. And it's interesting because just from my newspaper work alone, I feel like when the #Florida Man thing came out, I just laughed at it. I said, we've been writing about this. Go back and look at the Miami Herald clips in the 70s. You want to see about Florida Men. And now a lot of the people that are showing up on the memes and everything, they're not really Florida men. They're like, no, you're not. You moved down here, 6 months ago, and you just came here to screw up.
Florida Man posers?
Yeah, well, they're looking for they're looking for content. I say you restrict it to the people that were actually born here.
Oh man.
I'd say Matt Gaetz would be a Florida man. He's from Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. But there's no shortage of material. I feel very blessed to have been born here, and also, but when you're attached to a place and you care about a place, and you love the place and you love the people, I I could live anywhere. I mean, I could write anywhere. That you put, writer is just you're in a room with four walls and misery. It doesn't matter where you are, but if you care about it, it helps if you care about the place you're writing about and if you live in the place that you care about.